for so long. When G2 take the stage, they are the villains. They're now the champions of Europe.
I reckon they're still the villains. I certainly don't think they're the good guys of League of Legends. Here comes the ram, and there goes the kill. Fast wins. There is no chance at all. Cloud9 are deleted. Dominant wins. Double kill for the Syndra.
G2 have looked the best by far.
过了一轮之后，我们感觉 G2 好像是最难应付的，然后我们接下来希望能在 Griffin 跟 C9 里面拿到2胜。
I mean, it was definitely G2 that was the hardest game for us. I was winning top, and then I TP'd bot, and then the game was just like lost instantly.
Cloud9 cannot stand up to G2.
I think they're a really tough opponent, so we'll just have to be at 100% to be able to beat them.
오히려 G2는 조금 더 셀 거라고 생각했는데 막상 이제 1라운드 G2전을 해보니까 별로 막 벽이 느껴지진 않은 것 같아요. 충분히 저희가 이길 만한 상대라고 생각해요.
6-0 rarely happens in the World Group stage. European super team G2 look poised to do it.
Hello and welcome back to Worlds 2019, the group stage here from the Verti Music Hall in Berlin. I'm Medic, I'm joined by Frosk and Papa Smithy on the desk for the first 3 games of the day.
And it's going to be a really exciting group, and it's front-loaded in terms of stage implications for these standings here. It really feels like Cloud9 have to pay back Griffin, pick up this win to stay competitive.
And after what we saw yesterday, I'm not ready to sell Cloud9 down the river just yet. We saw Splyce really stand strong on the day. Svenskeren now back into the roster, and I think Cloud9 and North American fans can feel confident that you just have to perform once on the day. Maybe Griffin take a bad roll. Maybe today's not their day, and suddenly this group blows wide open.
But we've already seen Splyce showing us that you can just come in and have a good day and make it through to the quarterfinals. C9 did it last year. They 3-0'd in the second half of their group and made it to the quarters and then to the semis. We'll see if they can do it again today.
And the big thing they need to adjust is that mid game. I've actually been on cast for a lot of their games, getting themselves into great positions and then kind of meandering, not being able to decisively snowball pretty good early games. Now that's the sort of thing you can reset with a bit of time and potentially some roster shuffles.
And I do want to put a magnifying glass to kind of what's going wrong in the mid game, because I agree with you. It feels like everything is going right for C9, and then suddenly it shifts dramatically. And watching their G2 and their Griffin games, it's bad fights. And that can kind of go into bad macro as well, because if you're not playing the map and you get caught out in a situation. But I think it's about finding tools in your composition to make team fighting easier. We heard from Reaper in that interview. He definitely mentioned that that's kind of what they're aiming for. So as we put together these drafts, I want to see how Svenskeren's champion pool removes Elise priority, because it is a huge pick for them in the draft currently, and where they're picking up team fighting options to help band-aid that weakness across from Griffin and G2.
And it's the champions like the Fiora they were getting a lot of advantage from, but macro-wise not being able to put forward. Or even their first game with Heimerdinger, where the Siege let them down. So maybe easy to execute is the way for Oscar. And an Orin, for example, that we saw from G2 all the way back on the first or second day, is the sort of pick that would square up, but potentially drop down some of the priority on Licorice.
I would hate to see Licorice on something like the Ornn, especially because Renekton has been his go-to. It's either banned away or it's first picked by Cloud9 in terms of their stage games at Worlds right now. So for me, is Svenskeren going to go for this Elise? Or Cloud9 just hard tunneled in on Renekton and Elise as kind of their go-to combo?
It has worked out a lot for a lot of teams so far at Worlds, but I do want to look at the other side of the rift as well. Griffin coming into the week 2-1. They lost to G2 last week, of course, but you heard them in the video before we started here saying they don't think G2 is unbeatable, so then they have to believe that both Cloud9 and Hong Kong Attitude should be wins for them today.
And that's why it's a pleasure to see both these teams straight up, because obviously Griffin are also sweeping over all their organizational change behind the scenes and just trying to focus on one day. They can absolutely write off the past and reset themselves with a 3-0 today. That would push them straight up. It would require a win over the previously undefeated G2, but it all starts here.
That it does. Let's jump on into Champion Select. Griffin on the blue side, Cloud9 on the red. Veigar, the first ban, Pantheon removed as well by Cloud9.
And I want to hone in on some of these mage bottoms as the Syndra is next to hit the ban bench right there. And we heard it from Reaper, going to echo it again. The fact that Sneaky has really been going towards these mages, because the one thing that Griffin really have edges over virtually anyone, maybe save for G2, is their mechanical brute force ability in just 1v1 and 2v2 lanes. And that means that Cloud9 need to be hyper creative about how they're going to shore up that distance between the mechanics of their players.
And there was one facet we were really impressed with Cloud9's prep. Remember, they were on the blue side when these teams met a few days ago. The blind pick Fiora against Sword range of champions. It did a great job until the team as a whole couldn't win with Fiora. This time they're on the red side, and where you find your counter pick and who you give it to will always be scrutinized.
And remember what I said, Renekton Elise was kind of the go-to combination for Cloud9. They tried so many times to get their hands on it, and Griffin have read them like a book. They ban away the Renekton, they priority pick the Elise, and they have so many options for AD solo laners for Sword and Chovy to bring along with this AP jungler.
But the cost is heavy. Kayle has been surrendered. Champion almost permabanned on red side. Was gift wrapped and then ignored, but Xayah as an answer. We're seeing Xayah and Kayle fall through the bans. And let's zoom in on one fact. Both these teams in the mid game have not been specifically impressive. Griffin have been able to extend games, but not accelerate them. If the game goes infinite time, you can see a Kai'Sa swooping in with a Kayle ultimate, and that sounds pretty sweet.
But now we're actually going to see Sneaky on a traditional ADC across from the Xayah and the Rakan. That isn't going to be a Kayle that can be flexed into the bottom lane. So, you know, he's throwing down the gauntlet and saying that he can go toe-to-toe with Viper and Lehends.
Yeah, Xayah and Rakan in that bottom lane for Griffin. Galio was picked up here for Cloud9. Could be mid, but of course could be support Galio as well.
And you do wonder if they want to pair it with, say, a Jarvan from the jungle, just have that reliable engage. We've seen those engage duos be played already in this World Championship, and the Galio support and mid have both been flexed.
I agree with you, and I think that's what Griffin should actually look to pinch out, is target that champion pool in the jungle to make sure that you disengage a lot of the initiation tools that Cloud9 could pair with Galio.
And Griffin have, in the past, drafted comps that play around early mid-game. They played some Talon games at Rift Rivals and at the Elsewhere. I've heavily criticized those games because they've shown no ability to actually snowball through. So they have a very strong core of a draft. It hasn't shown its true colors. We still have the solo laners to lock in. So right now, I don't really have alarm bells on either side, except, wow, Kayle in the late game seems like the sort of thing that might get there because of the reputation currently of these two teams.
Kayle has been pick banned in most of our games throughout the course of Worlds, so if you can get her towards late game, she can have an incredible impact. With the Aurelia and Gangplank bans, Cloud9 pinching out that top lane pool, the Fiora removed as well. Licorice, of course, played that last time these two teams met.
So what's the jungle option going to be? We needed a hard engage. We've talked about the Jarvan. Nocturne definitely fits that bill.
He dives right onto the back line. Team that up with a Galio. Put the Kayle ult on Nocturne as he jumps in. You have a great wombo combo coming out from Cloud9.
It's a strong, reliable wombo combo in terms of getting access, but the people staying in it is less reliable than, say, for example, a Jarvan. When flashes are down, still, it's a golden oldie, something that Griffin have loved to play in the past. It does allow Akali and, say, the Elise, for example, to be on the front foot, and it really feels like battle lines have been drawn here when it comes to who needs to lead the dance in the early game.
Yeah, the dive potential from Cloud9's composition with the Galio, Nocturne, Kai'Sa, and the Kayle ultimate. It's very clear how this wants to execute out in team fights, which means that Viper need to be on perfect form right now on the Xayah, because everyone is gunning for him.
So what we blind picking is the big thing here, because Sword is taking either Akali or Camille into the top lane. Neither of these are his bread and butter when we think of Sword in his past stint as a starter. His Akali was actually pretty decent the couple of times he's brought it out. The Camille feels like one that could be a little bit more tricky in a skill matchup. The Fiora's not there available for a skill matchup, and Cloud9 are hovering. An old favorite of theirs. They are a Shen top team since the Impact days.
One of the scary things, though, is that there is going to be a break point where Camille can just kind of take over a side lane and take over the game, whether that is Chovy or Sword's Camille, whoever hands it lands into. I'd love to see Chovy pick it up because he is the stronger mechanical player. And yeah, Nisqy can try to take that Kayle and maybe just wave clear across from him, but Cloud9's composition really relies on being grouped up together. So Griffin had a clear win condition. If everything goes sideways, they can no longer 5v5, rely on Camille in that side lane.
The scary thing about side lane champions, though, Svenskeren, is have you considered playing side lane against Nocturne, Shen, Galio? This comp does one thing well. It swoops in from off screen and catches one person. You need the wards to do that. You need to be very smart against it, but it's not always the most reliable in fights. So this feels very much, if you can start to choke the life out of Griffin, get them to move back, it's going to be hard for them to re-establish connection. But if those long cooldown globals don't find a kill, that's a long lull to their off cooldown.
Well, we've already talked about some of Cloud9's mid-game teamfight woes in the first half of this group stage. We'll see if today they can rectify those issues. It's all on the line here for Cloud9. Their fate in their own hands. They need to win this game. And back onto Summoner's Rift we go for the first game of the day. Group A concludes today. And just to reiterate what I was saying, Cloud9 will want to win this game. If they lose, their destiny is no longer in their own hands.
And I want to go ahead and take a look at the jungle matchup that we have in Tarzan and Svenskeren, specifically on the Elise versus the Nocturne. I was talking to Galio the other day, and the thing is Nocturne usually has a reputation that he can't really do anything, that he's just there to power farm until level 6, but especially when he has lethal tempo, that's not necessarily true. Elise usually wins a lot of matchups on if she finds you first, if she hits the cocoon, but if she doesn't, against a Nocturne with lethal tempo, if he's within auto attack range of you, come around a blind corner, you walk into him, he can actually just annihilate you. So he actually has a lot more dueling potential than I think most people really realize, and isn't as fragile without that ultimate.
Absolutely agree with you there, FLICKR. And I look at these comps here and I feel like it's a lot about true colors, because you can understand the approach that both G2 in their first game against Griffin and C9 here are taking, which is Griffin famous for really not getting much done in the early game, very low kill games, therefore farm it out, get to 6 seems reliable against this team. But I remember the Griffin that people were disappointed not to see at the World Championships last year, the Griffin that went on that massive win streak in spring season, and they were decisive and on point and snowballing games in the early game. So which Griffin we get today could be so important in the context of this group.
And I think that definitely starts with Tarzan and Chovy's performance in particular, how these guys sync up. And when you have an Elise and a Camille, there's a lot of tools to really start that snowball. So Papa, I'm on the same wavelength as you. I actually just want to see that ferocity return to that iteration of Griffin.
Yeah, the old favorite was the Sejuani and the Camille. This time it's the Elise, so an extra skill shot to consider. In the top lane, so it's going to get early priority pretty casually on the Akali here. Remember, Akali no longer has the mini stun on R, so she has no ability to interrupt the Stand United.
Griffin did make the decision to put Chovy on the Camille in the middle lane, have Sword on the Akali up towards the top side.
I do have a quick question, Papa. If Akali tags Shen and he TPs, can she follow him still?
Yes, she can.
Oh, that's fun.
Trust me, that's already in the back of my mind, Frost.
Let's talk about the lane state here. Chovy's freezing just outside of the turret, and Nisqy doesn't have necessarily the ability to push this lane. Level 1 Q's not going to do it, so you actually have to give up a lot of lane control. He can't even pick up minions as they die. As this is happening, Tarzan is on the invade. Griffin for now controlling the mid lane scenario and actually taking advantage of an Elise in lane for the first time we've seen, a Kayle in lane for the first time we've seen in a while.
Yeah.
Licorice trading here actually onto Sword, gets him under the tower, but not going to be able to do too much more.
And you can see that Griffin going offensive everywhere in terms of where they're holding the wave, when they're trying to deny CS, because Svenskeren is on this Nocturne as they continue to apply pressure, chasing him out of his jungle.
Chovy's walking in front of the tower and through it to threaten a hook shot onto Svenskeren. That is a lot of pressure onto the Nocturne in the early levels.
Now, I will say that obviously it's not ideal to lose a portion of your jungle like the Wolf Camp, but because Svenskeren did start topside and got access to his Raptors and Krugs.
Oh, we're here.
Tarzan's behind the tower, Chovy looking for the wall dive, lands it, Cocoon's going to follow up, and that is first blood to Griffin.
I was going to say, it's not the end of the world for Svenskeren because he got the 2 most important camps, but it is the end of the world for his mid laner because there is just no assistance and no pressure that he can apply at this point to a 3-man dive.
We're talking about paying attention to the mid lane, playing through it. We saw that as Svenskeren gives up the scuttle for now.
At the moment, the 2 solo lanes for Griffin consistently harassing their opponents. Tarzan using the pressure they've generated to get into the jungle to take some of these camps. But Svenskeren will get the scuttle crab. Fear coming off. Here comes Sword from the top lane. Licorice on his way to help as well, but he's already down to half HP. There lands the Shuriken. Svenskeren pulls the spell shield. Taunt coming out, but Licorice will pay for this with his life. There's no escape. You have to feel the flash won't be used, and he falls for the 2nd kill of the game.
Pretty poor communication there from C9. They should know the 2v2 does not behoove them the moment that the fear tether was repelled. Akali first access, Akali comes in, someone has to die. This time it's Licorice.
And Licorice has to burn his teleport here as well because that wave is in an awful position for him. Sword trying to keep it just outside the tower range, won't be able to manage it too well, but means that there's now no longer that summoner on Licorice. He won't be able to impact the map until he gets his stand united.
So much of this mid lane phase has been beautifully controlled by Chovy freezing outside turret, and Nocturne as a champion has no ability to reset unless he just lane ganks. Here's the replay, trying to stay on the top side because that's the side the Nocturne was on, but turns out Camille has a very easy access range. Lehends there just in case. Very nicely done. The steal away here from Svenskeren, but feels like they read the situation a little bit late.
Yeah, and there was the confidence for Sven to look for the 1v1, but like you said, it's the 2v2 that was going to be the bigger problem. And then unfortunately, Licorice had to be the sacrificial lamb to get Sven out of that.
So when we come out of this replay, and we've already come through the mid lane a couple of times, you really need Nocturne to come through and help with the resets here. Because for once, a Kayle really at the whim of the enemy, and you see the trades.
Yeah, Chovy's already level 6. You can see how consistently he just jumps in, trades, walks away. That's all this Camille has to do, and Nisqy can't even approach the lane. He's running Kleptomancy. He's trying to get as much gold as he can, but he's so far behind already.
And remember, he doesn't have a ranged auto attack till level 6, so for now he really is at the whim of the enemy. Don't think of it as a melee versus melee matchup because of the changes to Kayle. But that's the reality for now, so priority basically effortlessly in 3 lanes for Griffin. It only matters if they have that next step and can put it to an advantage.
Well, they can definitely do that because it's an infernal of all things, but it looks like we're actually going to try to attempt another dive, or at least a plate pressure gank here as they're pulling both jungler and support again.
As soon as they see that Svenskeren is there, they back away from it, just get the vision control. Lehends able to roam around a lot because Viper is perfectly fine dealing with this Galio Kai'Sa bottom lane. No longer can you flash taunt on the Galio, means there's not that immediate kill threat coming out.
Viper's also just very good at playing weak side when majority of his team is on the opposite side of the map from him. He times his backs very well. He always bounces his wave. It's those intangibles of his laning phase that make him such a standout player outside of just his mechanical prowess.
Svenskeren spotted one side of the jungle completely warded, so Svenskeren's position here allows Chovy to just take aggressive hookshot trades like he's playing top lane. And speaking of wards, we already saw Tarzan lying in wait. He's jumped over.
Yeah, Tarzan's jumped onto the Scryer's Bloom here. I'm not sure if Svenskeren spotted that out. Assist me pings coming out from Griffin.
Surprise!
And the cocoon. Surprise! It's a spider waiting for you in the bush. Svenskeren's going to try and get away. Still has his flash, pops the spell shield, trying to get to the blast cone. Will escape with a divine judgment, but had to burn a lot to get away.
Yeah, so many cooldowns. The ultimate, the flash, and he just scrapes away from that one. Still sitting at level 5 as Griffin are just eating this map alive from Cloud9.
Important note, though, is that Chovy Flash couldn't get an ult range, so still has a summoner down, and any melee laner who loses their summoner in mid lane can potentially be exploited. 3 of the top earners all on the side of Griffin. Casual 1,400 gold lead here so far, and Cloud9 already just looking at those experience bars and hoping level 6 will roll in, but just like we talk about when a Twisted Fate is in the game, the first round of globals here can allow them to outnumber anywhere. If it doesn't go to plan, you fall in such a deep hole.
You have to feel like that's the play now for Cloud9. If that first paranoia, first stand united doesn't work,
that was
they are
the
just
play
going to fall behind.
The entire time for Cloud9, but they have been so delayed in trying to reach it.
We'll see if they're able to use it, because if they don't manage to find a couple of kills off that first play, they might just fall. Licorice tried to flash there, but Sword underneath the tower. The Akali mechanics coming up trumps there for the Griffin top laner.
And at this point, Cloud9 are just bleeding out in every single lane. They need to figure out very quickly how to get out of these lane phases, because the longer that Griffin keep them in the 1v1s, the 2v2s, they're getting destroyed.
You're gonna watch the replay here. Remember, Sword, not known as the mechanical top laner on the squad. Doran, more prized for that, but this is effortlessly clean from their top laner. and take the 2 shots, doesn't fall. And you look at what plan A is for Cloud9, it's a bot lane gank, right? That's very much the case. Taunt Flash, not a thing anymore on the Galio, but some setup there that Nocturne can profit on. His ability to lane gank well known. And as Griffin, you're like, maybe, okay, let's take control. Let's run to Rift Herald, but that gives you the 5v5 that you don't necessarily want to opt into as Griffin when the laning phase is going oh so well.
But the thing is we know what Cloud9 want to do. Cloud9 obviously have their globals. Everyone is looking at this bot lane, and it means Griffin also recognize it. So I should assume that Lehends and Viper will play very safe. Viper also bringing the cleanse and having access to the Xayah ultimate, and they probably won't overextend their welcome until they have access to the TPs on Chovy and Sword.
The world's freest Infernal walking over double control ward. The control ward advantage. If you actually look at the Rift, I believe there's at least 4 control wards on the map from the side of Griffin, giving critical information. They can also spot out the respawns and camps. This is a game entirely in their control, and this is the first early game from Griffin we give a big tick to. Now we move to the next quadrant, one where Cloud9 hasn't been able to perform. The mid game is fast approaching. A little bit early to say, though, the Rift Herald only now spawning.
But this is the reason we praise Griffin's early game a lot of the time. They're not a high killer minute team. They're actually one of the lowest in the LCK, but what they do is they use their vision control, they use their control wards to starve you out of your own jungle and use the pressure they have in lanes to let Tarzan work havoc on the map.
And in this tournament, the only elegance really from Griffin has been Chovy's laning phase, which has been obviously top tier. But when they really are firing as a squad, you sit back, and if you have any appreciation on how rotational play and macro play can come together, you just take your hat off to them, and you really appreciate. You sit back and become a fan, whether you're invested in the game or not. Getting to that point is something Griffin has been eluded from since, honestly, playoff spring season hit. So for now, at least, it's a good start, but it can all come unstuck really fast.
Possible setup flank here as we see Svenskeren sitting in the wings. I agree with you, Papa. I think an extended lane phase probably feels pretty good for Griffin. Continue to funnel all of this gold on a lot of different carries that spike very hard on 1 and 2 items.
And as soon as they take the Infernal Drake, what do? They bring their bot lane up towards the top side of the map, they continue their vision control line, and they make C9 face check in. The quickness coming out here, Nisqy's going to pop his stopwatch. Paranoia trying to jump on the backline, Svenskeren gets a lot of damage down, but the Blade Core will pull through them. Featherstorm coming out as well, and look at the backline, Sneaky, Divine Judgment trying to survive for the moment, but Chovy and Sword are still putting in work. Nisqy tries to flash away, just about escapes to live for the moment, but Licorice has been caught off towards the bottom side. Nisqy will fall, Licorice will fall, C9 will fall. They'll even take one under the towers for good measure. 7-0 to Griffin.
And Griffin just put Cloud9 through the meat grinder right there. They dove in, Cloud9 thought that they had their opportunity. Griffin read them like a book and ripped them apart. That is ample damage on the mid lane tower. That is complete control over the Rift Herald. This is devastating for Cloud9.
And again, when it's a global comp like Cloud9's, those long cooldowns have to be off before anything can happen again. And in the meanwhile, the gold lead is already humongous. We're talking 4,700 gold at 12 minutes. We talked about the first round. That one unfortunately didn't come together. The Rift Herald is picked up, and suddenly we talked about how Cloud9 needed to win this game to keep the fate in their own hands. Feels like even this single game, fate is largely controlled by Griffin.
And in this What's Your Move replay presented by Axe Gaming, we'll see just how sporadic the engage was from C9.
Nisqy actually used his stasis very early there under no threat as instantly Lehends just disengaged, and from here was already largely cleanup very early into the replay.
Yeah, it's the fact that the key cooldowns that Cloud9 need didn't find the right targets, and then Griffin were just already at an advantage from their item position, just dove into the backline, traded cooldown for cooldown, and assassinated C9.
Now, there is a good sign on the map. A lot of control wards invested top side, and now you just need to take a deep breath, appreciate where you are as C9, and just try to farm it out, because the next objective is a Mountain Drake. Probably shouldn't be rolling up to that one. You kind of have to seed a lot here and put faith in that next round of engagements. You can see very clearly the cooldowns aren't up as the Rift Herald is jammed mid by Griffin.
Should be able to take down this mid lane tower pretty easily. All of those plates will go across towards Viper, who's already sitting at an Essence Reaver. And it looks like Lehends is actually going to escort this Herald just for one more charge to chip away at that mid lane tier 2. C9 currently in a 6,000 gold hole. Need to find a way back into this game.
Yeah, this game's going to get accelerated very quickly now. Griffin, with access to the mid lane since that tower fell down, means that they can swing down behind this bottom structure, take it for free. So very quickly, this map's going to start just completely opening it up for the side of Griffin. And that can mean nice things for Cloud9. That means maybe you have the potential that you can find assassination targets with that swoop and scoop that we were talking about, the Shen, the Nocturne, the Xayah. But that also means that there's so much more gold sitting in Griffin's pocket that even if there's the best case team fight for C9, I don't know if they win it.
But I like your point, because yes, it sounds a bit kind of glass too half full as Sword runs in.
Yeah, Sword's going to get on the blast cone there, just chasing Svenskeren down. Might have to be careful because Zeysal and Sneaker are still in that top lane, but it's Svenskeren who ends up flashing away.
But until 20 minutes, you can roll 3 globals in bot lane, and there really is no response that's proportional on the map from Griffin. Yes, you'll probably trade down in terms of turret damage, but you lost your ability to choose which are preferential trades when the early game went this so far ahead to Griffin. So the perfect game is on this far. It can definitely be abated if they choose the right side lane play.
Tarzan landing the cocoon onto Licorice. Doesn't get too much damage down, but just the constant threat of a Griffin jungler being right in your lane is very scary here for Cloud9.
It just means that Cloud9 right now are looking to use those 3 ultimates, find someone in a side lane, find a quick hit and run, whereas Griffin need to make sure that if someone is overextended in the 1-3-1, that there's something traded for it. If they decide to go after Chovy because Akali has the Shroud, probably not the greatest target, that they have someone set up to get chip damage on a tower or somehow trade.
It's one of those old adages that can be applied to your family life with your friends. Pick your battles. Do not choose to fight at every corner here as Cloud9, because the early game really has put you in a position where it needs to be the next player's a trade up, or at least an even trade, with Baron spawning in about 4.5 minutes.
Perfect game just still on the cards here with that top lane tower not quite falling. I believe C9 should be able to chip away at it pretty soon. Lehends and Viper up here to defend. But Griffin have basically total control over wherever they want to be right now.
Man, it's not a good day for North American fans. When you're looking at Cloud9, you're like, let's not get perfect game instead of let's win this game. And that kind of feels like the situation that we're in right now.
For Cloud9 to find their spot, work out where they're going to attack. Unfortunately, their vision is quite shallow, and the team hasn't grouped to try to take down Sword, which, of course, is its own type of hell, trying to kill an Akali with flash up soon in the side lane.
Are you saying that she's
Slippery.
slippery? Okay.
I think the difficulty for C9 is all of these lanes are pretty slippery. Like, Xayah is very hard to actually get on top of. A Camille can wall dive away from you. Elise can rappel up. Rakan can jump away. You have to invest a lot of resources into a kill that might still escape you.
We might get one here.
Here we go. Paranoia coming out. They're jumping onto the back line, but there's the rappel up. And you can see Tarzan falls in the middle of them all. Shut down for C9. They find a single kill.
They're on the board. That's the important thing here. And Griffin had all walked over to handshake a fight in an area where there was really no objective to fight around. So that's a sort of misfight from Griffin where they could have just been spread across the map a bit better. Seeing the TP.
Oh! Licorice does a lot of damage there to Svenskeren. The charm coming out. Sneaky's the one caught up in it. Underneath the tower, he will fall. And now the chase is on. Svenskeren with a great shield. He'll fall in the end, though, and Zeysal follows shortly after. It's a double for Sword. He's 6-0-0 on this Akali.
And it felt pretty good for Cloud9 for, I'm going to say, 15 seconds there before Griffin showed up. Cloud9 didn't even get the tower, now looking in the mid lane.
They know Nisqy doesn't have ult here. The Hextech ultimatum will lock Nisqy in a box, and that box will end up being a coffin. He falls in the mid lane. Tower goes down in the top. Griffin 11-1 up and 9,000 gold in the lead.
Yeah, that gold lead is a mountain to climb over right now as Griffin, again, back in total control. Outside of the shutdown gifted to Sneaky from Tarzan, they've run a perfect game so far.
You know it's a bad time where the kill score looks like betting odds. That's not what you want to see, but that's the reality here at the moment. All the individual laners are so strong. C9 chose a draft that was about the global all-in. We saw the all-in find fruit, bear fruit with a single kill, but in walking up to that very low health turret that we thought might be the separator between a perfect game and no, that's actually what takes them down. Replay starts much earlier. This is the good moment for North America.
Yeah, everything looks good here. We finally got it. Again, not only did you kill Tarzan, but you also got the shutdown gold onto Sneaky of all people on that Xayah. But as you said, Papa, it was the overextension for this tower, thinking that Griffin were going to handshake and just try to trade cross-map. Trigger pulled on TP. We're going in, boys.
And it's one of those things where how strong is Cloud9 after their cooldowns are down? Well, we know the items aren't there, and the reality is very easy cleanup. The teleport from Sword on point. We reset again. Mountain Drake number 2 spawning in a minute 30. A 10,000 gold lead, give or take a couple of hundred pre-20 minutes.
Which means that as soon as that Baron spawns, not only with the Mountain, but also with that gold lead, Griffin are just going to walk up to it and say, you have to come and fight us. And either they take the fight because their ability to turn off of the Baron is so strong with Rakan and Camille. Like, I think Cloud9 have a minute to hoover up as much gold as possible. Otherwise, this game's just going to end on that fight.
The only benefit for Cloud9 is Sneaky is at 2 items now. Ginsu's finished, Manamune stacking up. You do have a Hextech Gunblade complete on Nisqy, so he is starting to get a little bit of that Kayle strength. He's hit level 11, he's arisen, so he has some more damage in his autos, but it is trying to find as many options for C9 as possible when there aren't that many in the back.
Oh, absolutely, Medic. We can't mince our words. This game is very, very in the advantage of Cloud9, and that almost feels like an understatement. I had 2 varies in there. So that's the issue they're in. For the site, you're correct, of Griffin. So the issue here for Cloud9 is, what do they have? Well, they have teleport down on Sword, so there is the potential to outnumber. That's what they drafted for. They can cross-map, cheat over wards with their globals. That's what they have to put into use. They can't think about what they don't have. They have to zoom in on what they do have.
They also have decent wave clear at this point in the game. Obviously, the dive threat from Griffin is still incredibly strong. The 1v1 threat. Is anyone going to help him?
Licorice flashes away. There we go. The hero's entrance from Zeysal will keep Licorice just that little bit safer. Sword almost jumped back in there, but used the perfect execution to get out of his flip.
But there's one of those key cooldowns that Papa keeps alluding to. Now that you don't have the Galio ultimate, that's just another piece that you really needed in kind of the perfect setup for Cloud9 to have a shot in hell at pulling this game back.
It's all about the trio to give Nocturne gap close, damage, CC, and also near invulnerability with the overshield. Right now, one of those pieces is gone, and guess what? It means that Cloud9 need to seed. Most vision wars, most objectives, they cannot afford to give up Baron. I look at the Drakes and I say this Baron gonna be pretty fast.
It's a great look so far for Griffin. Zeysal trying to get away. The Justice Punch won't allow him to escape, but here comes the paranoia, and maybe C9 have found a fight. Hexagon jumping onto the backline. Viper's already killed off Zeysal, and there's the double. Svenskeren falls as well. Here comes Sword, slicing through C9. Their backline decimated, their team deleted. It's a clean ace for Griffin.
I mean, C9 did find a fight, but it was not the fight that they wanted. Griffin just destroyed them. Now rock up to the Baron. We said this was going to be the go button as soon as it spawned. Cloud9 had to take the gamble. They went for the fight, and they just got deleted from the game.
5,500 damage by Viper on the Xayah. Outrageous damage total here by the AD carry of Griffin. Feels like Griffin have been in the hibernation since spring season. They've woken up, and just like those angry bears, they seem to want to take out some of their frustrations on Cloud9.
And a win here for Griffin sets them up really well for qualifications to the quarterfinals. It means they would have 3 wins, they would have the head-to-head over C9, and it would be very difficult for anyone to catch them.
So initially the team fight starts, it's Lehends that catches out Zeysal there, and then Cloud9 decide to double down, engage in, but you are walking face first into all of that Xayah damage. Viper has been so on point with his feathers.
Very, very clear picture painted by the replay there. If this was a nature documentary presented without comment, was probably what we would do on that one. Gold lead swells to the better part of 15,000, and it just feels like we're waiting for the closeout here. It's not a mid-game that you can throw with one bad decision, 1, 2, 3, to get it anywhere near parity for C9.
Round 2.
Round 1 didn't go too well, though.
Well, they've only got 1 punch, Medic.
Exactly. Can you suggest a backup option here with the Shen Nocturne Galio comp?
I cannot, but I'm hoping C9 can perhaps work something out, because as you say, they are 15,000 gold in the hole. You have 3 completed items on Viper. Tarzan is sitting with a Rylai's and an Oblivion Orb. Trinity Force and Ravenous Hydra on Chovy. You just look across the board, and any one of those carries being that strong would be very difficult for C9. With all of them being that powerful, it's basically impossible.
I do like the fact that C9 are just playing around their control wards, and they're just trying to find the pick. They know that the only fight that they win is a very unfair one. So try to survive this Baron, try to find a massive numbers advantage. That's the game plan.
Well, right now, Griffin are just forcing in the top lane tower. The inhib tower will fall. They're now looking for the inhibitor. You can see Sword is down towards the bottom side of this, keeping Licorice busy. Here comes the paranoia. The 1 punch has been thrown by C9, but they really don't have the damage to take down anyone. Griffin, Lehends still alive. Viper there as well. well. They just clean them up. You can't even cast this. It is disgusting to watch. Dirty stuff from Griffin. No response from Cloud9. And Griffin just slammed through the door. They break down the walls. They break down the defenses of C9. And they lay a stake on a spot in the quarterfinals.
They hit the perfect blackjack against Cloud9 and now have full control of top 2 in this group. A very impressive performance from Team Griffin, and Cloud9 need to find a mental reset and also need the stars to align to escape from the group.
I mean, we've had a lot of dominant victories at this tournament so far, but that might have been just the most brutal to watch.
Especially with the stakes, you know, it's not a LCK cast where you can start talking about Star Wars. It's a must-win game for Cloud9, so for them to just unfortunately have almost no agency in this game from about 12 minutes lets you know that this is the Griffin people whispered about in hushed tones, but never revealed itself to the world audience.
The Griffin perhaps we've been expected even from Worlds last year where they weren't quite able to qualify, then losing to SKT in spring, losing to SKT in summer. Some people wondered on the biggest stage of them all, would they step up? That Griffin shows me they can be just as strong here as they were in Korea.
And it also talks about kind of the gap that we have forming now. We have very clear contenders in just terms of mechanical brilliance and performance, the ability to brute force games like this, to just rip them open. And Griffin are one of those teams. SKT are one of those teams. G2. And unless you can compete with that, you don't get to be in the same level.
Does build hype to G2 versus Griffin rematch later today. Now, I don't watch a lot of anime or manga, but the One Punch Man didn't do so well in this particular series.
Yeah.
Maybe it's back to the drawing board. Maybe they try it again against one of their future opponents, but Cloud9 need to regroup. And unfortunately, a lot of their out-of-the-box strategies so far this tournament just haven't borne fruit.
I think the thing is, at times you've seen some strength from C9. Like in the Sona Tom Kench game, they actually had a lot of opportunities to win that with Licorice splitting.
But that's the key word,
yes.
Licorice. And you know, at this point, they go back to the Shen. And I understand why they did it with the composition, but you have to think what's been working for Cloud9 has been relying on Licorice getting these carry-oriented champions. And unless they can find something else to kind of build around him, I don't think any of these other strategies are really working, because Licorice seems to be the guy that's really standing on this tall on the stage for C9.
Totally agree with you there. C9 relying on Licorice perhaps for the rest of the week, of the games today. For now, we're going to hand it over to the analysts.
Thank you very much, Medic. And also welcome to Yamato Cannon on the desk for this one. I see Jat wants to get in there immediately to the Licorice point.
Oh, I just feel like overall, C9 has kind of lost control of their own fate, which is a bit disappointing to happen this early on in the day, because we know now if G2 wins their next game, C9 can't get out. They would be locked into third or below.
So huge implications from this game specifically. So let's dive into what happened, because unfortunately for C9, it wasn't pretty. And Yamato, I am going to go to you first off that Licorice point, because you brought up the same concerns as Frosk into this draft.
I think in the previous game against Griffin, Licorice was the good performance. He was playing Fiora into GP. He was winning it early. He shouldn't. In this game, Griffin had a very beautiful draft because they had the Camille Akali flex with Gangplank banned, Renekton banned. There's no top laner to pick. Shen was locked in, and all of a sudden you're put in a bad matchup. It's impossible to pick a good top laner here.
I mean, you just have winning matchups pretty much across the board for Griffin against a full scaling team that relies on these huge ultimate cooldown windows to actually make plays happen. Whereas I think the skirmishing power of Griffin is always going to enable them to take continued fights over and over again, because they're not as reliant on this big cooldown. So at pretty much every state of the game, bar 3-4 items from C9 going even, I think Griffin was going to win out.
Yeah, and so C9 Jat is sad, because I feel like they're probably not advancing. But Griffin Jat, who put Griffin in his pick'ems as #1 in this group, is actually pretty thrilled right now, because I think the theory of picking a scaling comp against week 1 Griffin is sound. They had deficits 20 minutes into all 3 of their games, and it looked like they weren't a good early game team. But the Griffin that I saw, that I thought they were going to be on the world stage with amazing individual laning and calculated play, should be able to win faster against inferior teams at the world stage. And I think finally, I got to see the Griffin that I was expecting to see at Worlds.
We also saw it pretty quickly into the game. Unfortunately for Cloud9, Griffin got out of the gate swinging. Tarzan was really active on the map, although I know that you had some things to say about it. The man still got 2 kills.
No, Tarzan definitely played super well here with an early roam up from Lehends, although I don't think he actually got an assist, but the idea was very sound. Use the power 2v2 of Camille plus Elise to get that early kill down bot side, and then, well, you have a winning 2v2 on the top side. Svenskeren should have never been in this river in the first place, and what it caused was the start of the snowball of this already superior matchup for the Akali.
Yeah, 2 solo lane kills generated by Tarzan when they also have Xayah Rakan bottom lane, really stopping C9 from being able to make any proactive plays outside of blowing all of their ultimates.
And the conversation has always been Blabber Svenskeren. And honestly, if you're jungling in a game like this, you have very little options. Svenskeren managed to steal away the crab, but even then they're waiting for this power spike. But the enemy team has the Elise E to go up in the air. They have the Xayah ultimate to get up. There's so many tools to get away from this combination, so I don't really know what C9 is waiting for with this composition.
Yeah, I mean, it was sort of the interesting thing for me there, too, when you compare the Blabber versus Svenskeren, because the first time these two teams played, it was Blabber on the Elise, and he had a really big early game impact, running in and bullying Tarzan on that champion. This time, the matchup flipped around, and Tarzan felt a lot more in his element to take those proactive plays.
And it is tricky, of course, for Cloud9 because we had those questions about Blabber. Now Svenskeren, the MVP, comes in, but you're going to wonder how this game specifically is going to trickle down now that they don't have their faith in their own hands, unfortunately. However, I want to put the focus on a Griffin that looked incredibly strong, and we now are seeing a completely different side of. In this game specifically, at the Rift Herald is where we kind of saw that the game would be completely over, because you still hold some faith in a possible turnaround, but this was just too much.
Well, look at how the Galio ultimate is burned for effectively no result, and then trying to dive into a bunch of Xayah feathers hasn't really worked for any team so far at the World Championship. So we've been over all of the ways in which the Griffin team composition once ahead could snowball, and this was just about the execution, dodging at the right time and chasing down kills properly.
Yeah, I think Griffin were coming into this with an item with a level advantage as well. So C9, I think maybe they're not supposed to fight there. Maybe they're supposed to just slow the game down at all costs. But realistically, if you're giving over a Rift Herald, it's going to speed up either way. So I think Griffin, from every point in the game, had the advantage.
I think this makes me very hopeful for the upcoming rest of the day with Griffin, because this was an absolute beautiful draft. We've talked about it so much. I think the first game against G2 that they did, there was this early game draft that went to hell with the Talia start. But I think in general, this is a team that can match G2 in terms of how creative they can be in their drafting.
See, it's interesting to me because I think, yes, there is an element of creativity in the drafting, but when I actually think about these two teams matching up, Griffin versus G2, G2 is never going to draft the comp that C9 just put together.
Of course.
G2 is always going to go for the skirmishes, and I think that's where Griffin will struggle, because when they can't control the early game, when they don't have guaranteed winning matchup for their lanes to allow Tarzan to play his control style of jungle, that is where they're going to break down, and that is what G2 is so good at doing.
Well, in this one, the Oppo player of the game was Tarzan, and he had a huge influence in this one. But with that, I would like to open the floor to the other analysts to talk about this clash, which is the 6th game of the day, Griffin versus G2, and in general, the discussion of Griffin taken first in this group or G2. Ender said they're not going to get this draft, they're not going to make these things happen. What do you think, Jat?
I mean, I was happy when Yamato joined the desk and I saw his predictions on Twitter, and I have someone else who predicted Griffin to go 3.
Oh, so you're both wrong.
Yeah, so we're both very excited to prove everyone else wrong. We'll see what happens. I think it can be a close matchup. But what I will say is week 1 Griffin played negative early games fairly consistently against all 3 teams. If they have been able to now be a little bit more settled in the Worlds meta, understand what types of drafts they're going to be able to have, I think they have the individual talent to put up a very strong fight against anyone in this group.
Like, I think, my biggest argument for why I think G2 is going to lose one game is because I just can't believe them going 6-0. I still believe them to go out first after a wonderful tiebreak at the end of the day, but I think Griffin has still shown some weaknesses in the early game, so weaknesses in the top side, and I think G2, after digesting these games, can still dissect them at the end of the day.
And the thing that I kind of want to say is we have no perfect teams in League of Legends anymore. That's just not how the game works with the way teams have found success. There's not as much vision. There's more risk-taking. There's more turret dives. Every great team has some level of inconsistency. So Griffin, when they're at their best, I know this is a conversation we like to have a lot, when they're at their best, play a lower risk style of game than other teams do at their best. It's just going to be a very interesting matchup. If Griffin can show the level of play they showed in this C9 game the rest of the day.
And their final note there?
I'm just going to say, I don't think the full low-risk style is the best way to play the game anymore. I think that G2 have a very good read on the meta coming into the tournament. When you have Jankos and Mickey X performing at a very high level, jungle and support controlling the pace of the game, finding where to make fights happen on the map, that is such a good look for this team, and I think that's where they have the advantage.
Really final note, Yamato.
I think the beauty of G2 is always, oh, they're inconsistent, but that means one thing, that their games are always in their hands, and that's a massive strength. Do you prepare against G2 and say, oh, maybe they play bad, that's how we're going to win? Well, good luck with that.
Well, the beauty of that is that we're going to see them on stage right after this one.
Yeah.
And earlier we did catch up with the entrances rather of Griffin and Cloud9 to the Verdi Music Hall through the lens of the Oppo Reno 2, which boasts up to a 20% zoom. Up next, HKA take to the stage opposite the undefeated G2 Esports. Don't you miss it.
Access to his Raptors and Krugs.
Here,
Tarzan's behind the tower. Chovy looking for the wall dive. Lands it. Cocoon's going to follow up. We'll see if they're able to use it, because if they don't manage to find a couple of kills off that first play, they might just fall. Licorice tries to flash there. Nisqy tries to flash away, just about escapes to live for the moment, but Licorice has been caught up towards the bottom side. Nisqy will fall. Licorice will fall. C9 will fall. Sneaky's the one caught up in it. Underneath the tower, he will fall. And now the chase is on. Svenskeren with a great shield. He'll fall in the end, though, and Zeysal follows shortly after. And maybe C9 have found a fight. Hexagon made him jumping onto the backline. Viper's already killed off Zeysal. And there's the double. Svenskeren falls as well. Here comes Sword, slicing through C9. The one punch has been thrown by C9, but they really don't have the damage to take down anyone. Griffin, Lehends still alive. Viper there as well. They just clean them up. You can't even cast this. It is disgusting to watch. Dirty stuff from Griffin. No response from Cloud9. And Griffin just slammed through the door. They break down the walls. They break down the defenses of C9.
You don't have a chance against me. I can calculate 90 trillion moves in advance. Not fair. Not fair.
Red Bull gives you wings.